All right, so this lesson, basically you're going to see a lot of the same kind of problems that you saw in the previous section, but now we're going to use the calculator. Now, I couldn't find a clear cut any place where it said that you are allowed to just use the graphing calculator. I think it's going to depend on the wording, or maybe the point values, whatever. You do need to show work, and you show work by writing down what you put in for all the variables. And then that'll count for, if they give partial credit for your method, but you get the wrong answer, whatever. So at least you need to do that. I will tell you whether you're allowed to use the calculator on the test, so you do need to make sure that you know how to do it by hand as well. But if you are using the calculator, probably I'm going to ask the same thing, that you tell me what it is that you're plugging in. So basically, we're going to be using the TVM solver, the time value of money solver, and it's under the apps button. So you've already done some other things under apps. You're going to go to apps and then finance and then TVM solver. So here is what that looks like. So you hit the apps button, and you're going to go to number 1 there. And I think that should pretty much be number 1 for everybody, but you're looking for the word finance, and then you're using that very first one there. Okay, and then you'll see this screen right here, and we'll go through what all those letters stand for. So the N, that represents the number of time periods. Now, that's not going to be just 5 years. You have to take your compounding into consideration. So you're going to take the number of times a year that you're compounding and multiply that times your years. So if you've got 5 years and you're compounding quarterly, that's 5 times 4, so you would put 20 in that spot. The I percent, that represents the interest rate per year, and it does say percent there, so it'll remind you that you're putting that in as a percent. PV, that represents the present value of the investment. Now, one thing that's a little bit different is whenever we did this by hand, we didn't do this, but in the calculator, your present value, you're going to put that in as a negative, and that's because that's money that you do not have because you've invested it. The PMT is the payment for each time period. I don't remember seeing any in your book where there's anything that you put there, so just leave it 0. FV, that's going to be the future value of the investment, how much money you end up with after a certain period of time. PY represents the number of payments per year. CY represents the number of compounding periods per year. Sorry. So those are going to be the same numbers. Again, I didn't see any examples where those were different. If you're compounding quarterly, again, you have 4 compounding periods. The number of payments, that's how many times the bank is paying you. So those would be the same. And then the payment end or begin lets you choose between the payments at the end of the time period or at the beginning of the time period. Interest that's paid on investments is always calculated at the end. So again, for all the ones that I saw worked out, and for your book, they were all ones where you would do end. Now, you're going to be filling in really all of these but one, solving for the interest, solving for the number of time periods, solving for the future value, whatever. So whichever one you want to solve for, either leave it blank, or if it won't let you leave it blank, if it's making you put something there, just put 0. And then when you're done, you will go back to whichever one it is that you want to solve for, and you will hit alpha enter. So if you look above the alpha button, it says the word solve. So when you hit the word alpha, or the alpha button, it'll activate that solve function. And then that number will change from being blank or from being 0 to whatever it is you were trying to solve for. Okay. So, Holly invests 15,000 UK pounds in an account that pays 4.25% annually, compounded monthly. How much is her investment worth in 5 years? So, I'm going to show you here on the calculator in a second, but just to kind of look through here, 4.25%, that's pretty easy. Negative 15,000 because that's how much we're investing initially. No payment. We're compounding monthly, so those numbers are both going to be 12. We're getting 12 compounding periods a year, 12 payments a year from the bank. I'm looking for the future value. It actually let me leave that blank. If it doesn't let you leave it blank, like I said, just put a 0 in there, and you can do it. I'll show you in a second. Okay, so then the 60. all right? So the 60, we get that by taking our 5 years times 12, and the 12 was because it was monthly. So that ends up being 60. And then just a reminder here that our present value is negative because that's our starting value. Okay, so let's go to the calculator here. And I don't know that you really need me to show you how to do this, but just in case, we're going to type all those numbers in there. So 60, 4.25. Remember, you're putting that in not as a decimal, but as a percent. My present value, negative 15,000. Payment, just leave that 0. Future value, that's what I'm looking for. Look, if you try to leave it blank, it won't let you go past it. So just leave it 0. And we'll come back to it in a minute. Compounding monthly, so 12, and then 12, and again, you want to leave that on end. So go back up to what you want to solve, which was the future value. You can leave it 0, or at this point, if you want to clear, it'll let you clear it as long as you don't try to move away from it. Hit alpha and the enter button, and then it figures it out there for you. So that's my future value, and of course we're going to round that to 2 decimal places unless it tells you otherwise. So my future value is 18,544.53 UK pounds. And that's my answer. I think actually I was going to have you write down the entire decimal there, but that's not something we need to worry about. Okay? All right. So next, how much does Helena need to deposit into an account to collect $50,000 at the end of 3 years if the account is paying 5.2% annually compounded quarterly? Okay, so in this case, the future value is going to be $50,000. That's going to be positive because that's how much I'm going to end up with. We're going to find our N by taking our 3 years times 4 because we're doing quarterly. So 12. So there's my 12, my interest rate, leave the present value blank or 0, no payment, $50,000, and was compounded quarterly, so each of those is going to be 4. Okay, so again, let's come back here. And, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. We'll go back to our apps and our finance and our TVM. Now, it's going to have on here what you just had last time, so you'll just need to change it. Grab my paper here so I remember what we're doing. So that's going to be 12. 5.2. I don't know the present value. And again, it won't let me go past unless I put a 0 there. $50,000. $4 and 4. Now, definitely I would double check, make sure you got all the right numbers there, that you've typed everything in correctly. Go back up to what we're solving for, which was my present value. Hit alpha and enter. Okay, so it's a negative, but when you give your answer, you'll take the negative off. So the present value ends up being negative, and my answer is going to be 42,820.99. Now, actually, that's not my answer. We're going to round up, because if she deposits that amount of money, she's not going to end up with $50,000, because the answer was actually 0.985 blah blah blah. So in this case, they actually, now you could probably say 0.99 and it would be okay, but just looking at what the book has done and some other resources that I saw, they went ahead and rounded up to the nearest dollar. So 42,821. I think the 0.99 would be okay. You definitely, though, if it's a case where you would be rounding down, because that's the way you're supposed to round, don't round down, because if you round down, again, you wouldn't end up with that $50,000 after 3 years. You would be too short. Okay, 2 more here. How long must Magnus invest 4,000 euros at 6.4% annually compounded half yearly for it to amount to $10,000? So, okay, my present value, we're going to enter that as a negative. When our N is computed this time, we're going to take, we don't know what the N is. We're gonna try to find that out. But when we do find out our N value, it's not going to be the amount of years. It's going to be the number of half years. So it's actually going to be years times 2. So we'll talk about that when that comes up there. So our 6.45, negative 4,000 because that's initial, no payment. $10,000 is what we would end up with. And then 2 because we're doing it half annually, which means every 6 months, so 2 times a year. Alrighty, so up here now, we're going to put in a 0 there. We'll come back and solve for that. 6.45, negative 4,000, 0, 10,000, and 2. Okay, now back up to, I'm just curious here for a minute. I was wondering if you're at the end, if you can just arrow down and it will take you back up to the top, but it doesn't. Okay, so again, leave it 0 or clear it out, whatever you want to do, but alpha, enter. Okay, so 28.896. So again, 28 years wouldn't be enough. They're not going to want you to say 28.9 years. So let's run that up to 20 or 28.9 periods. So let's run that up to 29. Okay, so N ends up being 28.86, blah, blah, blah. But we're going to say that's 29, but that's 29 half years. So we're going to have to divide that by 2. So the answer would be 14.5 years. Now, if we had been compounding monthly, then I would end up dividing my answer by 12. Compounding quarterly, I would divide my answer by 4. Okay. All right, last one. Calculate the compound interest earned on an investment of 13,000 euros for 4 years if the interest rate is 7% annually compounded quarterly. Okay, so present value, that's going to be a negative, so we've got negative 13,000 there. My N, I'm going to multiply 4 years times, let's see, we're compounding quarterly times 4, so that's going to be a 16. Now, once we find our future value, which is kind of what they've asked me to find, they actually want to know how much interest we've earned. But if I figure out what my future value is, then I can subtract to find out the actual interest. Okay, so no payment, 7% interest, 4 and 4 because we're compounding quarterly. Back here, I'll say that in a second. Okay, so 16. 7, negative 13,000, 0, 0, because it won't let me leave it blank, 4, and 4. Okay, but come back up here to the future value, alpha, enter. Okay, so we'll round that off there. Okay, my future value turns out to be 17,159.08. So we're going to take 17,159.08 and we're going to subtract 13,000 from it. So the interest is 4159.08 euros. Now, what I was going to say is if you're doing this, for your on your test, and really even in your homework, I would still like to see this. Do this, okay? So just make a list there of all the numbers that you're putting in. I would include the payment, even though we're not putting anything in for that. You need to make sure that you leave it as 0. And then as far as whatever you're solving for, you can either leave it blank or you can put a 0 there. But every single time, write those 8 things down. You don't have to worry so much about writing the word end. But I want to know what numbers you were plugging in.